Hello everybody, how are you all doing today? So, first off, down in the description below you will find a link to the power shop where you can buy energy mixes, hydration mixes, shakers, and stickers. And if you use code Blackheart in all caps, you will get a 10% discount. And now that the sale is out of the way, today we'll be looking at mainly what our Geminis are going to do regarding Unreal. Like, what are we gonna work on? What sort of tutorials are we gonna try and focus on? Which will determine on what genre we're gonna try and tackle for cloning the game. Right now, I'm gonna hop onto the stage. He should be on right now.
So, and then we'll see about, what we want to, what kind of game would we want to make? What game, like, there might, let's, you know, uh, in my particular opinion, I would feel like,
Yes.
Blackheart and I should probably build a game that we might both enjoy playing in our off time. Like, hey, if we're going to be building it, maybe we can have fun with it. Or maybe we can, play it on stream or something like that for you guys. You never know. But I mean, that's something that we'll have to figure out, a little bit. So, but there's Blackheart in the stage, so let me go ahead and invite him to speak. There we go.
Hello.
Hey there, Blackheart. How you doing, David?
I'm doing okay. You?
Oh, I need to first off, I need to stop my music and get my headset audio so everybody can actually hear you. um, okay. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. So, um, but I tried to look up a little bit in terms of the tutorials, and unfortunately, a lot of it is pretty much YouTube based.
Yeah.
We may we may need to just like find a common YouTube video that we may need to kind of look and work with to kind of you know build our own, which is gonna have its own problems because I mean, um, trying to um, I mean, I don't really. I mean, first off, we're probably going to be needing to pause it and stop it at times to kind of go through, um, what steps they did in order to get it to work. Second problem with it is the fact that they may come after us. The person who created said video might go, "Hey, you guys are copying all of my material. No one's gonna watch my video if your guys are, showing it on screen." Um, which obviously is a bit rough. We don't really want to do that.
No.
I mean, um, there's been a lot of drama lately concerning that. Reaction videos.
Yeah.
And we got to be careful with that.
Yeah, that's why I never mess with that.
Yeah. Um, I mean, obviously, if we do go over a video, then we're gonna need to make sure that we, copy the the link for said video, and make sure that we put it, state it in our description for that, for our live stream and whatnot for that particular day, which is gonna be a little rough. But because I'm I'm not that great in editing and stuff like that. I'll need to remember that. Um, but to be honest, I didn't really find too much in terms of if we're gonna be making something in 2D. We're probably gonna have a little bit of difficulty trying to go over that, you know. Um, because Unreal doesn't really do a good job with it in
No.
themselves.
No, all I
And
can find on their documentation was the top-down 2D game setup, 2D tile set, and tile maps.
yeah,
The flip book, which is for 2D animations,
hmm
and that was pretty much it.
yeah. Um, Now, uh, I did find one particular link that uh, supposedly covers a 2D game development tutorial series. Um, but a lot of it is also the YouTube videos as well. So it's like, uh, it's it's not exactly great. It doesn't necessarily go through its own tutorial. It's basically kind of giving you links to, um, you know, um, to other, well, I mean, they do have like additional pages of information, but eventually it gets to a point where they're just gonna cover over, videos that Unreal did. So it's like, so eventually it'll get to that point, um, but I mean, if you want me to, I can send you that link for that.
You can send me the link and I can look at it off stream.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I fear we can at least cover the topics that we kind of went over yesterday. Well, not yesterday, the day before. Uh, of um, we have some topics that we probably should cover if we want to be able to use them in our game, right?
Alright.
Such as like audio, um, what was it? Audio, game controls, level transitions, so on and so forth, right?
Hmm.
So, um, you know, is there something else that you might have in mind, or you know,
Um,
or would you like to just kind of go with that? I want to know what you're thinking about as well, because obviously, this is a joint effort. I don't want to
I know, I know.
be,
The
I don't
audio
want
one would work for whether it be 2D or 3D. The audio one would work for pretty much anything.
to, yeah.
As for the level one, maybe since 2D and 3D are somewhat different on how they manage levels.
Hmm.
And
I guess.
what was the other thing you said? Was it?
Well, here, let me send you the list of things that I kind of wrote down here. I'll put them in the Discord. Um, so those are topics that um uh, I figure we should probably go over because those are um
Yeah, which game to
ones.
make would probably help on deciding. Okay, what tools do we try and focus on first? Which audio would fit for anything.
Yeah.
Game controls would kind of depend on what we go for, since each kind of game has like its own set of controls in a way.
Well, I mean,
Like
we're
a
we're
side
still
scroller would not have the same controls as a top down, for example.
gonna. Well, okay. Yes and no. Movement could still be, movement could still be like the WASD keys,
Yeah, but how they react
but
would not be the same.
but that doesn't necessarily, we're looking more at the game controls, what we can use to control the character. It doesn't matter what that character does with said controls, that will handle in the game itself. What we're trying to figure out is like, what controls do we take in, and then we can figure out like how those controls are handled by the game. Like if we're doing like a keyboard, for example, and we're like going, okay, like you said, top down, WASD means you're going north, you know, northeast, west, south, and west, right?
Yeah.
In that kind of fashion, right? Whereas, the space bar might be like, hey, we're just gonna shoot our gun or something like that, right? Whereas in a platformer, then we might be like, okay, well, A and D, you're moving left and right. Up might be a jump, or might be like climbing a ladder. Uh, S might be like, hey, you're like moving down like a pipe, or
Crouching.
or moving down or something like that.
Yeah.
Space bar might be a jump. Um, so you might have like a different key for firing your weapon or something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I mean,
mm,
so obviously the game itself determines how we use those controls, but we need to know,
how
we
to
need to
map
be able
them.
to exactly how do we get those key commands.
Yeah.
How do we have the game engine understand when it's pressing those key commands, and how does it interpret those key commands into the game itself. you know how does it transition the W being pressed to what the game wants it to do. So
Yeah. Yeah. As for animating characters and objects, that would depend on the what we're doing, if we're doing 3D or 2D, because I think the one on the Unreal would be more catered to the 3D, but if it's 2D, we will have to look at the flipbook and the tile tutorial.
right, well, I mean, we're still going to want to have a 2D animation. Okay.
Yeah, which is the
Just,
flipbook one.
yeah.
And tiles manage collision as well.
No. Um, but we're still going to need to cover that, because I mean, let's face it. What there's very few games where you see no animation whatsoever from the uh, from your particular character. Now, obviously, if you're playing something like a top-down shooter, like R-Type, or you know, uh,
Either how to
Commando,
click.
Contra, or something like that. There's real. Well, I mean, Contra. There's animation there.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of
but
top-down games have animations. They just, depending on the developer, how much animation it has is up to them.
well, you know the um, if you're playing something like Galaga or something like that, or R-Type or something like that, you're just flying that spaceship around. There's no like animation in the spaceship itself. You're just moving it left or right, up or down, and that's it. You know, Now you could try to put some animation, like, hey, if you're turning to the left, now suddenly the ship kind of angles a little bit to the left. To say like, oh, I'm leaning more to the left, or I'm leaning more to the right. I mean, you could put that in, but that's very minimalistic animation for the most part. But for things like Pac-Man, Contra, Super Mario Brothers, you're gonna have like walking animation, or idle animations kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. But yes, you're right. That's what they call a flip book, but it's still the same thing. It's
Yeah,
still
just the
animation.
flipbook is
So
just okay. I'm gonna take this set of frames. I'm gonna order them like this to use as an animation.
yeah. So um, so yeah.
Yeah. Object
But
collision, again, for 2D will be the tiles stuff, while on 3D, that one will depend, I think, on how
yeah.
Unreal manages 3D objects. Okay.
So now, is there one there that you would like to kind of look at first? My personal um, my personal viewpoint right now is we should probably look at source control at the very beginning. So we can try to see what we can do about setting something up for ourselves for later.
Hmm.
Um, like is there something? Does Unreal allow for source control through GitHub? Is there some other source control that it handles? How do you handle the integration of it? That kind of thing. Um, that's what I'd like to kind of learn a little bit first before we do and go too far. That way we can maybe set something up, but that's my thought line. What about you? What are these something that you would like to kind of focus on first?
Let's see. Yeah, finding about source control would be a good thing.
Okay. Do you want to cover? Do we want to cover that right now?
It was on the. Was there on anything about that on the documentation?
Yep. There's
Okay.
a page for it.
Um,
If you go to the get starting, it's on the left hand side under
and
understanding the
I'm
basics.
using the search function up above. Oh, there it is. I hope this is the right one. Might as
Well,
well show
at the
it
very
on
top,
the screen.
there should be like a understanding the basics and source control near the very top of the
No,
page.
I think I found it. Just give me a second. I'm going to studio mode so I can edit the size of the browser since I don't know if we'll have the Unreal Engine open.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure I found it. Before I make it if I make it bigger, I'm gonna put it as it is right now. To have a quick look at it.
Let me bring up your stream so I see what you're seeing.
Okay, yeah, looks like the engine might be active for this.
Okay. Shall we go through this or?
Sure.
Okay. So the Unreal Editor has built-in support for source control packages. Source control is used to manage changes over time to code and data, which is pretty much essential nowadays, and enables teams to coordinate their game development efforts. Perforce and SVN are supported by default. Okay, so I've heard of SVN. I personally have not heard of Perforce, but that's me. I mean, I know of GitHub uh, as a main one. I know of SVN.
Yes, I
Um,
never heard of either of them. I've only used GitHub.
um, I forget what the what the N stands for in SVN, but it's basically source version. Um, Oh god, I'm blanking on what the N stands for. Hold on.
Look it up real quick.
Um, um, I mean, it's shorthand for subversion, but I'm wondering if they had any, if it's, some kind of accurate acronym kind of thing. Um, but it doesn't look like it. I think it's just you know, a simple um, shortening of the word down into their basic, you know, some basic letters.
Hmm.
So, so you know, maybe you can say, the source for a source, version control or something like that, but it's not necessarily that. So, but I personally have not seen Perforce at all. So I don't know what that's all about. It might be something related directly to Unreal. Um, I'm not sure. Let's see. Um, Free version control software. Um, the uh, yeah, it looks like it's just another version control system that I personally haven't heard about. But I mean,
Yeah.
let's face it, there's a lot of source control software companies out there already. So, um, you know, um, if you, I'm just looking at, people also search for GitHub, Smart Bear Software, Atlassian. It's like, okay, just a bit, in terms of, you know, let's see, source control software. I mean, Git, Prefors, Azure DevOps Server, Apache Subversion, Concurrent Version System, Rational Clear Case. It's just so much that's out there. It's
Hmm.
like, pick one.
Yeah.
um, but more often than not, I hear about people, uh, you know, lately it's been mainly GitHub. That's
Yeah. It's
been kind
a
of the main,
most well-known one.
yeah, currently. Uh, for for a while it used to be, straight SVN, where I used a program called Tortoise SVN to handle source control.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, Perforce, no idea. Haven't used it, so I don't really know.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Alright, so activating source control. You can activate source control in one of two ways. In the level editor's preferences window. So here, I'm gonna go ahead and open up one of the projects so I can kind of see what they're kind of talking about here. So,
Hmm. Yeah, not the same.
so level editor's preferences window. What are they talking about by preferences? I mean, it's a window, so I don't see preferences in the window drop down, so hmm. content browser, which, okay. Let's see. Developer tools doesn't have preferences. That's not in there. Maybe editor preferences?
Maybe? I don't know.
I'm not necessarily seeing. I'm not necessarily seeing a location in the editor preferences that shows anything concerning source control outright. So, I'll have to close that down for right now. Okay, so at least, okay, so under the content browser, okay, the middle screen, you know, where you have the save current, modes, content, marketplace up at the very top, there is a source control up at the very top where it says source control is currently disabled for, you know, I have like the programmers, program quick start open right at this moment in time.
Yeah.
There is a source control button at the very top. Now, you can connect to a source control, but seeing that we don't actually have one, you know, it will, you know, that's not going to necessarily work for us.
You know,
Okay,
if you keep
so
on reading, it says activating source control via editor preferences. So in the editor preferences, we should be able to activate source control.
okay, well, I'm not necessarily, I wasn't actually seeing it per se, but we can look through this a little bit more. So concerning activating source control via editor preferences. So you can activate source control via the editor preferences window by edit, editor preferences, and loading and saving. Aha.
Yep.
So
Let me
editor
show what that looks like.
preferences, loading and saving. Gotcha. So where is that? Okay, source control down at the very bottom there. So automatically checkout on asset modification, prompt for checkout, add new files, use global settings, and then tool for diffing text. Well, that doesn't necessarily show where you need to connect to on that, so that's a bit rough. But not sure what we can really do about that there. But let's move on, and we'll see. Like maybe they'll tell us how to connect. So
Yeah.
we might need to do it through that content, you know, from the content browser itself. So automatically check out an asset modification. When checked, this will automatically check out any asset that has been modified. So if you are, you know, changing an asset, if you're changing code or something like that, it will automatically check it out so that people will know that you are making any kind of modifications to it. I mean, I'm assuming that you know about source control, right?
Yeah, but yes.
Okay. So it's just meant so two people don't have, you know, don't check out the same software at the same time. Otherwise, um, you might have some problems with like if say, you know, you check out the source code and then I check it out afterwards, okay, and then I submit like a simple like if statement, right? Well, that if statement isn't on your version of the software that you checked out. So when you check in your version that might have, like, say, a for loop afterwards, that if statement that I might have made is completely wiped out because it's not in yours. So when you save it, only your version is checked in, so that if statement is gone. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So typically, you want to kind of hold off on checking out anything that someone else has. So typically, you might be able to kind of work through that a little bit. Like if someone checks it in, then you can then you can um, check out that version, to update yours, and then you can check in what you have, so you don't screw up, or you don't have any kind of um, you can see their changes, it modifies into yours, and hopefully, any changes that you might have made, doesn't get absolutely destroyed by what they did.
Yeah.
So,
Neither her
um,
shy.
but obviously that's um, very dangerous,
Mhm.
to check out. So prompt for checkout on package modification. When checked, a prompt will appear when you make changes to a source controlled package, asking if you would like to check out or lock that package. Okay. So, if there's something that is, you know, has a lot of information in there that you need to modify in some way, then you might want to check out that entire package. So yeah, okay. Add new files when modified. This will add new files to source control when they are modified. Okay. Um, so this, um, if I'm understanding this correctly, normally, for source control, you, whenever you add, like, make any changes, right?
Yeah.
There's always a way for you to kind of roll back to any previous changes that you might have made. And since, you can remove the new changes that you made to go back to a previous save, right?
Right.
Well, in order to go about doing that, in a sense, need to save those files individually every single time that you are, um, making any changes and making any kind of modifications to it. So if you don't do add new files when modified, then there might not necessarily be any particular rollback. You'd have to be very confident in your submissions that you will never need to roll back anything.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, at least that's what I'm interpreting from this. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but that's what I'm interpreting from what they're stating here. So, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, it does sound like it is that way.
If there's something else, or if there's something else that you might be thinking, then please feel free to speak up because I don't want to override
Don't worry.
your mindset.
Don't worry.
So, use global settings. So use global source control login settings rather than per project. So changing this will require you to log in again. So, um, not quite sure exactly what this is meant to be all about. Um, I guess in this particular case, instead of having to log in multiple times, like if you're if you're like maybe making like multiple projects for some reason, right? That's it's basically saying, hey, in order to modify any settings in this one project, you're gonna have to log into said project. Whereas if you have global settings, then you just kind of need to log in once and you're done. So at least that's how I'm kind of interpreting it. Um, why you would be working on multiple projects at the same time, I don't really know.
Depends on the
Um,
company.
yeah,
Some companies have that habit on doing multiple projects at once.
yeah, but having a programmer hopping into like multiple different programs at the same time sounds like sounds like they're really pushing the multitasking, and let's face it, multitasking can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So, and I don't really, some people might be really good at it, but more often than not, I find that it can be very
Stress inducing.
um, stress-inducing. Find it can cause a lot of problems because you're trying to juggle multiple things at the same time, and you might just kind of drop the ball. So,
Yeah. Or get things
uh,
mixed up and bring one thing the wrong project.
I mean that can happen too. So, hey there, Em, how you doing there, bud? Welcome back to the stream. So yeah, it's I my personal preference is focus on one project at a time. Get that project done, and then you can move on to the next project. That's my personal um, mindset about it. Now, that's not to say that, um, like, hey, you get done with the project, you're never going to come back to said project. Okay. You may come back to it again for, like, hey, maybe you want to make a version 2 of it. So
Yeah.
you may need to kind of go back to the said project to update it,
Yeah, like
or
Cobalt
maybe you
did.
need right, or maybe you need to fix some bugs in there or something like that, that you didn't necessarily catch the first time. Um, like you might be on your second project, but the first project, someone comes in and says, "Hey, I found the bug. You guys should fix this." And it's like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Where's that bug? Oh, there it is. Done." And send it right back out again, right?
Right.
Or send an update out. Same kind of thing. But you know, concerning those global settings, do we use a global setting where you just kind of log in once and it handles like all the projects, or do we have it like at a per project kind of deal? So
Yeah. In my personal opinion, I'd rather have each project be separate and not doing something like global like that.
okay. Um, yeah, tool for definite text. So specifies the file path to the tool to be used for different text files. Okay, interesting.
Hmm.
You know what that is all about, right?
Uh,
I can
mm,
explain if you
might
don't.
want to explain because I think the description I got once before wasn't very reliable.
Okay. So, when you are, um, okay, there's two ways of going about, different text. Okay. There's like your, maybe you need to check, um, uh, maybe someone, maybe you're in a situation where people are grabbing the same file at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they put in a new file that you're gonna need to grab to make sure that they're not overwriting anything that you're gonna need to change yourself, right?
Hmm.
So like for example, you're trying to work on this one function, trying to get it to work the way you want it to work, and suddenly someone adds in a new file that suddenly like wipes out that entire function. What are you going to do, right? All your work that you've been kind of working on that is completely gone based off of their file, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you would hope that that doesn't actually happen, but I mean, let's face it, if you're allowing for sharing of the same file, that could happen. Um, so you can then do a diff, which is basically taking their source code, putting it on, like, say, the right side of the screen, and you take your source code, the one that you've made, and put it on the left side of the screen, and you call what's called a diff or difference between the two source files, and it basically compares your two to see if there's any kind of changes whatsoever. If you added a space, if you added a new line, if you added some additional code, did you take out code? You know, it basically shows those differences between the two, um, like either on your side or on their side or on both, kind of showing, what is different between the two different source codes. Like, you added in the for loop. Okay, well, they didn't add in that for loop, so that for loop would kind of go there on their particular file, that kind of thing.
All right.
Um, um, and you can kind of do this again with um, like previous versions as well. Like, say you wanted to see the difference between the current version of the file and the version prior. Like, you want to see what someone else, what your prior, what your other developer did in that change. Like, maybe they removed the for loop or something like that, and you want to maybe restore it or something like that. So, or you want to see what they did. So you're like, hey, I'm getting this strange bug all of a sudden. What did this guy do? So you check the current version with the previous version, and you do a diff between those two to see what was removed or added or whatever. So you can kind of see, once again, you see that, what was added, what was taken out, and it's just space, new line, so on and so forth, right?
Right.
So that's how you use a diffing tool to kind of help yourself out. So um, so do they have a tool pre-built into Unreal? Who knows? But it sounds like they're basically saying, hey, you can specify a path to a tool that you have yourself, so you don't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
okay, so activating source control via the content browser. You can also activate source control in the content browser. Well, I mean, technically you haven't activated anything, from the loading and saving. You haven't specified a source control there. There's no place to put down a website or anything like that in the source control and loading and saving. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, there's these are more settings for your source control, but not actually stating where your source control is.
No.
So, that's the editor preferences are just preferences. That's it. So, but activating source control via the content browser is something that is happening. So, you can also activate source control in the content browser. To do so, right-click any asset or folder at the bottom of the context menu in the source control section. Click Connect to Source Control. I mean, that's one way of doing that, but I mean, there is a source control at the very top of the, um, you know, there's a literal source control button at the top of the window, or
Right.
top of the context window. So, um, you know, I'd be very careful with right-clicking any asset or folder because it might only source control that asset or folder, and that's it. So, and that might not be what you need to do. You know, you might need to source control the entire project.
I guess that would
Maybe.
depend on the role for each person.
I mean, true.
Like maybe there's someone in charge of just the NPC, so they would just source control the NPCs.
Right. Um, yeah. So obviously it's dependent, but yeah. Um, but I mean, if you're doing assets and folders and code and stuff like that, then it's like, well, maybe right clicking isn't necessarily the best to do, but we move on from there.
Yeah.
This will open a login screen where you can select your source control system and enter any appropriate settings and other information. Enter the appropriate information and click Accept Settings. After source control is activated, the display of the assets in the content browser will change to reflect their source control status. And some source control options will be included in the right-click context menu. So obviously this is going to be very helpful because if, say, um, a source file has been modified, has been changed by another developer, then you will typically see that the Unreal Engine, or um, your development uh, platform, Visual Studio, will show that, hey, you know it'll kind of show like a little context saying, hey, this has been modified, and um, you may need to refresh to make sure that you get the current version. So okay, so status icons. The context browser will display special icons in the upper right hand corner of assets to give the source control status. Below are the available icons and their meanings. So a red check mark is checked out by you. So you've checked out, one particular source file, and it'll be the red check mark. Okay. If it's checked out by another user, you'll see a blue check mark, and you see that there's like a little padlock there,
Yeah.
meaning that most likely they have it locked, so you can't check it out yourself, which is typically a good way of going about doing it for the most part. But you know, um, because you don't necessarily want people clobbering other people's code, but you never know, right?
Mm.
Maybe maybe you're really in a rush and everybody needs to kind of work on the same source code for some reason. That's going to be a mess, but I mean, uh, you know, you never know. It all depends on the company, right?
Right.
So, um, you have marked for add, which is a red plus mark there. So basically, say you have um, say you created another you created another class. You created another C++ class that will handle additional um, um, topics that you want to do. Typically, it will show up, as a yellow question mark there, as not in the depot. Okay, meaning that there's no version of it in the source control. Okay, so if you're seeing that yellow question mark, that means that there's nothing in your source control repository holding on to that information. So if say like the power goes out and you never saved it or something like that, then it's gone forever.
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
So sometimes it's good to add these files to your source control so you won't have that particular problem, right?
Mm.
Um, so so when you see the non depot, you can you know uh, basically select that file and say, hey, I want to add it, or marked for add. So then you'll see that plus mark there. So when you commit all your changes to the repository, then that file will now be added into the repository. And now everybody else that has access to the repository will see it. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the newer version of the file exists in source control. So if you've seen a yellow check mark, then you'll know that someone has committed a new version to the repository, and you're going to need to kind of refresh your repository to see the changes that were made. Now, you might not necessarily care. Maybe you that's part of the source code that you're not really working on or anything along those lines, but
It just
it's
simply
good to
depends
kind
on
of
what part of the project you're in.
right. You still might need to use it, in your project. Like maybe they added like a new function into a class that you are using, and now you can use said function yourself. Like maybe they added an animation to an actor that you are using, and now you're like going, oh, I can use that animation now, yay! That kind of thing, right?
Mm.
So that kind of thing, and that's okay. So source control actions. While source control is active, the following context menu will be available when you right-click on an asset. Yeah, checkout, refresh, history, diff against depot. So, checkout. Checks out locks the asset for editing. This prevents other users from editing the asset at the same time. Um, I There should be a way for you to check out and not have it lock. If you want to do it, I think there's an option for you to go about doing that. You know, um, so um,
I guess
to
we'll
the
know more in
settings.
the next one where it says checking out and checking in.
What's that?
I guess we'll know
Maybe.
more for down below where it says checking out and checking in.
Maybe, but I kind of doubt it. Um, but more often than not, checking out will lock the file. So, um, that's typically like the default behavior. If you don't want that locking behavior, then obviously you'll have to like maybe change it if you can. I'm not, some programs might not even allow for you to do that, to keep it unlocked. So, uh, I guess it depends. So, refresh. Refreshes the source control status of an asset. So, like, maybe before you commit, you always want to refresh because when you do refresh, it checks the repository to see if there's any newer versions that someone might have committed to the repository. So, say, you know, um, they don't show a mark for when something is like already been committed and is perfectly fine. Like there's nothing else going on with it on the status icons, which is kind
Yeah.
of weird. You would think that they would show that, um, but if you do a refresh, like typically I think I've seen where they use like a green check mark to kind of say, hey, this has been checked in. There's been no changes to it. Everything's fine with it. You can check it out without any problems, right? Um, so let's say you click that refresh, and suddenly that green check mark turns into the yellow exclamation point, meaning someone has committed right before you did that refresh, or prior, after you checked it before till to now or something like that, kind of thing. So um, so now you see that yellow check mark, and now you're going to need to update you know um, what you have, right? So history gives a revision history of the selected asset, allowing you to see previous edits. You know, uh, what I said prior with seeing previous source
Yeah.
versions.
Just version
Same.
history.
Yeah. So that just basically shows you, you know, and obviously you're gonna want to make sure that you have a very detailed description of every time you check in files. Like, if you say something like, I modified code, and that's it,
Well,
then
what
you're
code
gonna
did you modify?
exactly. You're not necessarily, if someone is trying to figure out like what broke in someone's code, they're gonna be like looking at all these descriptions, going, okay, that tells me nothing.
Yeah.
But if you do something like, hey, I modified this particular function to do this, then that might give a little bit more information, right? So documentation. Documentation is very, very necessary when you're doing group projects.
Yep.
So cannot stress that enough. So, and then of course they offer the diff against the depot. So this allows you to check the asset against the version currently stored in the source control depot. So let's say, someone added a newer version into the depot, and now you have to, double check your version versus their version or something like that. You can use that to see.
Hmm.
So, or you can see, what they changed. Like maybe your code is now suddenly breaking because of what they added or something like that. Like maybe they didn't even do any kind of compiling on their end before they uploaded their code, right? So now
Right.
everything's breaking, and now you're having to kind of diff to see what the heck they changed. That's screwing up everything inside of it, or something like that, right? Or maybe one of the assets just kind of flies off into space, you know, at random times, and you're like, wait, this never happened before. What's going on? What changed, right? So you use that to see. All right. Checking out and checking in. So to check out an asset for editing, simply right-click it and choose Checkout. When checking the asset back in, adhere to the following protocol. Right-click on the asset and choose Check In. A dialog will appear with the required change list description for the check-in. Enter a description which will be added to the asset's revision history. Click OK when finished. So, a change list description is required, so the OK button will not be enabled until a description is entered. But let's face it, you want to be descriptive.
Oh yeah.
So, um, all right, moving on. Content hot reloading. We're getting close to the end here, so I'm gonna just kind of power through it if you're okay with
Yeah,
that.
I'm okay with it. Plus, I'm also it's already 8 for me, so I'll go through it fast.
Okay. Content hot reloading is a new feature that an in-editor source control uses to reload content automatically when the content has been modified by source control operations. Currently, automatic reloading only works when performing source control operations via the in-editor source control integration, and any external changes won't trigger reload. We intend to remove this requirement in a later engine version so that external changes will also trigger hot reloads. Content hot reloading also provides the ability to reload an asset from its last saved state on command. This can be done by right-clicking the asset in the context browser and selecting the reload option under the asset actions group. This can be extremely useful if you have unsafe changes to an asset that you wish to discard. in order to revert back to the on-disk version. So this feature currently carries the requirement that you have source control active for your project. No shit. Deactivating source control. You may find that you want to deactivate source control after activating it. Why? I don't really know, but sure. Only use this option if you are absolutely certain that you do not want to use source control. Deactivating source control will put your content out of sync with your source control system and will make it impossible to check in changes. In the upper right hand corner of the level editor window, click on the green double arrow icon. This brings up the source control login screen. Click Run Without Source Control button. The green icon in the level editor window changes to a red circle with a slash to indicate that the source control is not being used. So the only time that I would ever say that this is kind of necessary is if like maybe you've been removed from the company or something like that, and they tell you, hey, you need to remove your source control or something like that. You need to disable your source control. We're going to be changing our password, and you're never going to touch our source control ever again, kind of thing, right?
Right.
Obviously, not something ideal, especially if you're, you know, um, if you've been working for that company for who knows how long, and you want to continue working there or something like that. Maybe you're that kind of sucks, but they may say, hey, you're gonna have to remove this or something like that. No, they themselves might, force you out of the source control. Like they might remove all your permissions and stuff like that, and you don't have any access to anything anymore. So even if you were to try to connect to the source control, you might not have any permissions to see anything. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like,
It could be also, okay, you're not part of this project, we're gonna move you to another one, deactivate the source control of this project.
Yeah.
And wait to be reassigned.
Or something, yeah. Pretty much. So, but obviously, not necessarily something that you might use often, or at least I hope not.
No, no.
There might also, or here's another thing. Maybe it's an old project and you don't want to see those files anymore. Like you just want to delete that folder from your hard drive. You don't want to see the folders anymore. You don't want to see, it's taking up too much of your space. You're like, I don't want to deal with it anymore, so I'm just going to delete that entire folder. And but before you delete it, obviously you want to disconnect from the source control, otherwise it might interpret your deleting as deleting the entire folder structure from the source control itself. So you probably don't really want to have that happen.
No.
Especially if you have to go back to it later on, right? Hey, I don't want to see our first version of this, because we're all done with it. All the bugs that we want to fix are fixed. We just want to kind of delete those files from our hard drive and move on to the next project, right? Yeah, and then you do that, you hit the delete, but suddenly it deletes your everything in the source control, right? And you're like, maybe you're not really even thinking about it. So it deletes everything from the source control, you move on to your other projects. Then later on you go, hey, what about, doing a second version of this old game that we have? That sounds great. Let's go check it, and you look and suddenly it's all gone. And you're like, oh right, I deleted everything. Oh no, that kind of thing. So.
Or it was lost.
Yeah.
kind of what
You
happened
would
to
hope.
Gearbox with one of Homeworld standalone expansion. They lost
Mm-hmm.
the source code.
Yeah. So, not exactly ideal, but I
Nope.
mean, it, to say that it doesn't happen is, lying. you know,
No, it can
so
happen.
it can and has happened.
Yep.
So, all right. So that's a brief description of source control. Now I'm looking at the Unreal under the source control. Um, on the context here. Let me bring up the Unreal Engine here. So under the, if you're looking at the Unreal Engine right at this moment in time, and you're looking at the window, you see the context window. There's a source control button at the very top.
Yep.
Right now it's saying source control is disabled. So if you click on that, you see there's a couple actions. There's check out modified files. There's submit to source control, and which aren't available right at this moment in time. You can't click on either one of those because
Nope.
we don't have a source control right at this moment in time. And there's one for connecting to source control. Now, this brings up a window that I don't know if anybody can actually see or not.
Let me see if
Nope.
I can show it and just need to edit one of my window captures.
Yeah.
Yep,
But
there it is. It's visible on mine.
okay. I'm not gonna bother showing it. Anybody can really see it, to be honest. So,
Yep.
you see the source control login. You see a provider, which right now it says none, which we don't have a provider right at this moment in time. But if you click on that drop down, you'll see Subversion. You'll see Plastic SCM. You see Perforce,
Mhm.
and you see Git, which is a beta version, which is interesting.
Hmm. Considering for how long
Um,
it's been going on.
yeah, you would think that they would have integrated Git into their source control fairly early
Yep.
with how
Well,
used,
probably Unreal Engine 5 has the completed version, probably.
probably. Hard to say.
Yep.
Uh, but um, now the version it there is no like web page that really stores the when you're using Subversion, there isn't really any kind of web page that it stores the files at. Okay, Subversion kind of keeps the repository pretty much on your hard drive, so it can it can fill up your hard drive quite a lot if
Yeah.
you're not you know if you're not careful. Um, and in some ways, that can be a good thing because it keeps your files private. So no one can kind of see your code, no one can modify your code, no one can break in. Like for example, for Git, if someone hacks into your account, they could potentially be changing your code. Right? They can kind of then they can connect to that particular you know repository, change the code, put in some kind of malicious code in there or something like that, upload it, and now suddenly your Git repository is has some kind of virus in it or something like that, right?
Right.
You know, so it's not perfectly safe. So obviously Subversion would be the safest route out of the bunch, but at the same time, you're gonna need your hard drive space in order to handle a Subversion repository, right? So, um, Plastic SEM and Perforce, no idea. Not
Don't
sure
know.
how they handle the um, repositories. Where they store the repositories at. You know, is it a version of Subversion where they keep the files on your hard drive? Don't know. Is it a version that's very similar to Git where it's on an actual server? Don't know. Again, no idea. But we'll have to kind of look at that a little bit more when we develop, you know, when we start working on our own, game. For right now, that's something that we'll have to hold off for now.
Yeah.
So. All right, but that's gonna be it. Let's go ahead and close out for now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and mention, update my note saying that that we kind of covered source control.
Yeah. And
for now, so
let's see, what should we tackle tomorrow?
Well, I would say let's leave like the UML, you know, for last because I want that kind of fresh in my mind when we start working on our first game.
Okay.
Sound like a plan?
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of put that at the end of my list, at the end of my notes, so we kind of cover that for like the last topic. I mean, the which platform and which game to make, we can kind of save that for
When we
like
start making something.
right before we do the UML, or like right after we do the UML. I would say probably right before. What say you?
Like what platform we're gonna be putting it up will probably be when we decide to actually start making the game.
Right. But I mean, we're probably gonna need to know what. We're gonna need to know that information before we really do any kind of formal UML. So, so that's why I'm thinking maybe we can figure that out before we study any kind of UML work or UML tutorials or anything like that. Or would you prefer doing that afterwards? I mean, I'm good either way. I'm just saying.
I feel like I'm good either way as well, so I don't know.
I fear, you know, doing it before and then covering the UML, we can kind of figure out, like, you know, during the UML, like, what portions are we really going to be, like, looking at, kind of thing. Or, you know, we might be, like, while we're doing the tutorial for UML, we might be able to kind of, like, construct our own UML at that time as well. You know, like if we already know, like, hey, we're building the game of Pac-Man, well, then let's build the UML for it while we're studying it. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So that leaves audio, game controls, animated characters and objects, level transition, AIs, object collision, physics, and blueprints. I would say let's put the ones that probably are gonna be like maybe like the toughest ones that we might have some difficulties dealing with, like right at the very, like, let's study that early, because that might be something that we're gonna be needing to kind of review anyway, right?
Right.
And it might not be something that we're gonna be like using right away either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like AI and audio, for example, those are probably gonna be kind of more late than early, or you know, and during the construction of the game, I would imagine that like audio and AIs might be more later on in the game development than early.
Yeah, most
Do you agree
likely.
with that?
Yeah, in early development would most likely be um, controls, animation, and collisions.
Okay, so you want to do like game controls, animating characters and objects more later.
Sure.
Um, so, okay, hold on, let me. Okay, so right now, we've covered over source control. I have audio and AI. Do you care which order we do those in, or
Either one is fine.
okay? Right now, I have audio and then AI. I can switch them around, but it probably doesn't really matter all that much. Um, I would say that we're probably gonna want like object collision, like one of the last ones. Um, Animating characters and like in order from earliest to latest. We're probably gonna want to do like game controls are probably gonna be kind of late in our coding for the most part, I would imagine. Um, but object collision and character animation is going to be fairly early in development, right? So I'd say we'll do like game controls first, then say animating character, and then object collision after that, in terms of order.
Trying to organize a little bit. So, what was it again on first?
Um, so kind of going a top-down list here. Game controls would be
Okay.
first covered. Animating character would be second, and then object collision would be the last topic covered out of those three. Do you agree with that, or do you want to change things up a little bit?
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So so we have level transition, physics, and blueprints. That are like the last three that we should I have in that list that I sent you um, that I'm not quite sure where to kind of put them in. Um, I would imagine physics would be something that we're probably going to want to do fairly early, depending on the type of game we make, right? So I would say maybe put that right before game controls.
Mm, Probably yes, because the character's gonna have some physics that will react to the controls.
Okay. Um, uh, Blueprints, I would say that we should probably study that early because I'm not quite sure what blueprints are all about. I know that Unreal Engine uses that a lot, so I'm thinking we'll put that like maybe after AIs,
I don't know.
or do you want to cover that later, like after object collision, like like super um like have that as one of our last topics that we study.
Hmm. I'd say probably yeah after object collisions.
Okay.
Some from what I kinda understand, blueprints kind of streamlines a few things.
From the looks of it, yeah. Again, I barely looked at it for, you know, so I don't really know completely. blueprints give me kind of like a UML um, vibe to it. Like you can use blueprints to basically be like a UML in a sense. So um, so we might not even need like a UML. We can probably just kind of get away with doing like a blueprint. But I don't know. That's that's what I'm not sure about.
Hmm.
So
Then I'd say we put it after object collision, probably.
that's fine. I'm okay with that. And what about level transition?
Hmm.
I would imagine that's fairly late because we
That's when we
still
start
want to
making
make
like multiple levels.
right. We need to finish our first level.
Yeah.
We need to build our first level before we consider doing anything else, right?
Yeah.
So, um, do we want to cover that like super early? Like, maybe cover that tomorrow, like before audio? Or do we want to cover that late, like after blueprints?
Hmm.
Because I'm pretty sure that we're probably going to need to kind of go back to it anyway.
Yeah. Uh, Probably after blueprint, since we're probably gonna be working with just one level first before we even look at multiple.
After blueprints? Okay.
But who knows? Maybe
Wait,
blueprints can handle level transition.
maybe. Okay, so here's I'm gonna send you the list again on Discord, so you have it. So and new list and bam. Okay, so that's what I figure our our schedule of everything that we kind of want to do in the next couple of days. Sound like a plan?
Yes, it looks pretty good.
Okay. So tomorrow we'll go over audio. The day after we'll cover AIs, then physics, then game controls, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So, sound like a plan?
Yep.
All right. Then let's go ahead and close on down, my friend, so you can go get yourself, some more food and prep for your game. Which, what are you doing today?
I'm gonna continue my Homeworld series by starting Homeworld 2 Remastered.
Okay. And I'm gonna be doing some video uploads here in just a second, but that's gonna be it for this session
Yep.
of Unreal. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now. Anybody that's watching this recording later on YouTube, help us out with the YouTube algorithm, but like and subscribing. Check out our descriptions. Help us out there. And yeah, stopping recording now. All right.
Alright.
I'm closed down on that.
Okay.
Um, you wanna? Did you want to do your own outro yourself, or?
Nah, I'll do it after editing stage. So
Oh, no, no worries.
yeah, because I'm gonna have to look for someone to meteor shower over on VStream.
Sounds good.
Alright, so
All right, my friend. Let's get out of here
yep.
so you can take care of all that.
Yep.
We'll
Um,
you enjoy Homeworld, and I'll be moving on to Warframe in about 30 minutes myself. So,
yep. Okay,
all right,
so
take care.
bye.
Bye.
Okay, stage is closed. And I need to find someone to meteor shower over on VStream. while I get something to eat. Let me close a few tabs before I open it though. Okay, there we go. Alright, and mute desktop. So at least before, well, I close down and start a new one, until I do that, you guys at least can enjoy another streamer. I'll be back in roughly in 40 minutes to an hour. I'll try and be quick about it. So this extended a little further than I had originally anticipated. Now let's see who is on right now. There are several people. Pastel doing a little birthday stream. Kinda tempted to meteor shower Pastel right now. Let's see. I also kinda wanna meteor shower someone that needs the attention. Got some other unfamiliar faces like Merton. I do not recognize this person. Hexy Live, also don't recognize you. Let's notice a little bit of lag on that one. Let's see. We got Grail Carden, don't recognize. Alright, I remember you now. A bit of a sleepy bee streamer when I last meteor showered this person. Oh, and they're doing a little charity stream. Might as well meteor shower Krail then. Let's okay, come on there. Let me interact with this. And slash meteor shower. And okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna go get something to eat, and I'll be back later with a new stream of Homeworld 2 remastered. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye for now.